Sahana Vavatu, Sahanao Bhunaktu, Sahaviryang Karavavahai, Tejasvina Vadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Verse 12, we started by acknowledging these deities, these forces that are helping us change and helping us all around you, the air you breathe now, and the memory that's helping you, and making this knowledge stick that is also considered a deity. It's something that we all want. We want this knowledge to stick, don't we? And so these deities are always helping us from day one since we are born. In fact, even your parents can be considered deities in one way or the other, and your grandparents and your grandma and grandfather, all of them have contributed so much for you being here, and how much sacrifice have they gone through, and gone through world wars and villages not having, any food or water to drink, and then having to travel long distances just so that your parents can live. And because your parents were taken care of, they met and now they gave birth to you. So much history has gone to put you here so that you can now say, what do I want in life, and what's really important. So much sacrifice has taken place for us to be here. And thereby, verse 12 starts by pointing out that let's not forget all of those who have contributed to our success and our prosperity and our happiness and our health and our being here. And, so you can appreciate once in a while how much it took for you to be born in this body. And why are you in this body and not some other body? So much has gone in that final decision that's made you hopefully now appreciate and say to yourself, if I could go back, would you change anything? Would you change your parents? Would you change anyone? Think about that. Would you change anything at all? Knowing that your life has led you to this knowledge, which is considered the highest knowledge in the universe, because it talks about that which is the substance of all things. So would you really change anything? Maybe if you did, that would be enough for you not to be here anymore. You would have easily gone into Brahma Kumaris, where you wear white and you remain pure, and they say, don't marry, stay single, or you could have gone to some other institution that's trying to do the best they can, but still under the influence of distortions and ideas that are not keeping with what is. And so you could have bought that plan, and that would have been your life right now. But why is it not? Why is someone else's life like that and yours is not? You think about that? It could have been yours. You could have gone into and been persuaded by some organization to join, and somehow something saved you. What was that? That's the deities that we're talking about. What saved you and took your hand and said, no, don't go that way? You've been down that path a million times. All you got for that was a new birth. What saved you? What caused you to change your mind somehow out of all of the confusions that you thought you had and inadequacies that you thought you had, or lack of proficiency to make the right decision? Somehow you still made the right decision. And that's what the verse is bringing forward, to take the time to appreciate, why are you here in this position, in this place? Now, I can tell you categorically, sticking around with Advaita Vedanta and seeing the value in this knowledge, that says a lot about your mind. It's not easy to keep a student. It's easy for them to come, but it's not easy for them to keep. And even those who are staying, some people listening to this for 20 years and they still haven't heard about or captured Satyamitya, the basics of Advaita. what is this Brahman? What is this Maya? It's still this big mysterious talk. And, after 20 years, you got to ask, how is this possible? I mean, if the knowledge is crystal clear, the explanations are crystal clear, and somehow, even if you're there, showed up, still something is missing. So it takes so much effort and behind the scenes workings of the invisible hands of the Lord for you to somehow stay and be committed and willing to sincerely understand. And for some reason, you're so stubbornly persistent, you just don't want to give up. It's almost like something's wrong with you, which is good. Something's wrong with you in a good way. And even when you get thrown off, it's not working and disappointments come, it's almost like this is exactly why I'll stick around and figure this out. What is that voice in you that just keeps on pushing you and it doesn't give you a break until you are resting in yourself, which is the truth. And that's what verse 14 then says. In this cosmic wheel that is which you are a participant of, you're going through this cosmic wheel, and everything within this cosmic wheel is connected, such as it's stated that the food is what gives your parents the livelihood to then give birth to you. And then the rains is what gives livelihood to the food. And then the yajna, which is the harmonious actions of everyone's participation, is what sustains the rains and the weather and the harmony of the world. So everything and everyone is within this cosmic wheel, and it thereby demands or asks or calls of you a certain level of participation, because, as we said, all of those forces that have caused you to be here in that same way, because you're never outside that cosmic wheel, you are in one way, there's a duty for you to give back, because there are generations after you and I die physically, generations will be born, and they too will be sitting on Zoom classes and sitting down with their crossed legs and on their chair, listening to a guru or someone who is telling them the exact same knowledge. And they will too be discussing, why are we here? Why has the world somehow, why is this tradition being kept alive? And it is because of what's happening right now. This is what is it about. Therefore, you are being that contributor in this moment. The teachers who are of all natures, of all organizations, they're doing the best they can. And it is in my view that there is no really a bad teacher. A teacher only does what they can do to the best of their ability, and there will always be a listener. And the listener is, why does a listener listen to a teacher? It is because there's a click. There's a click between the teacher and the listener. And somehow you relate to their style, to their words, to their personality, and you just like it. It suits you. It speaks your language. It tickles your senses and your intellect and your emotions, and so it really works for you. And this is what sustains that cosmic wheel. And then in verse 15, it was stated that the reason why this cosmic wheel is sustained is because of what the Lord has given us, and that is the sixth sense. You can call the Vedas a sixth sense. We only have five senses, and with those five senses, we can only use perception and inference for in fact, for everything. However, Ishvara and Brahman, they are not available for touch. You will never be able to touch God, because you're touching objects, but no object is the embodiment of the total Lord. you will never be able to feel the presence of Ishvara, because any feeling is time-bound and Ishvara is limitless, and thereby you cannot put a limitless entity inside a 5-second thought. In other words, you will never be able to feel or experience consciousness, nor will you be able to see it in some form, like a light in your Ajna chakra, as some have been told in traditions of Kriya Yoga, for example, nor can it be smelled like a fragrance, like sometimes they say, you know, the Lord smells like rosemary or something. So one time when I was in this journey, young, a couple of years ago, maybe over 15, I went to Amma, the hugging saint, and she was smelling like
Jasmine?
she smelled like jasmine. And I thought this is what enlightenment is. When you're enlightened, you smell like jasmine. And I was convinced. So I was now looking for people who smell like jasmine, because that to me meant they were liberated. Now, what took me away from that notion, I don't know, but something did. Nor can it be tasted. So it is beyond the 5 senses. So therefore, the Veda serves as the 6th sense. It talks about the realities which are unavailable to any scientific mind, no matter how genius it is, of any caliber or experience. You need the Veda to point out the 2 additional realities through which you can then arrive to using a pramana, a shabda pramana, using certain words and the implied deeper meanings behind the words. For example, if I say to you that consciousness, which is the final truth of all things, its nature is existence. Now, when you hear the word existence, what you hear is the direct meaning of existence. So immediately your mind now thinks of an existent object, such as an existent pen. Now, an existent pen only exists in space. If I show you a pen over here, it is not over here. So anything existent will be in one place. It will not be in another place. But also, if I say existent pen, then that implies the pen is not here, and now it is here. So the word existence, or sat, if you look at it directly, it means anything that exists in time and space. So now the teacher has to remove that direct literal dictionary meaning and has to bring out the actual meaning of what we mean by existence. And thereby, when we say that consciousness is sat, or existence, we don't mean existence, which is an existent object in time and space. We're talking about the truth of time itself, time and space itself. For instance, I used this example before. There is a person, a conscious existent person, or you can call him a presence that is conscious. And you're having a date right now, and you're really enjoying with some friend or someone that you adore, you love their presence, and you only have 10 minutes to talk to them, and you sit down to talk to them for 10 minutes. How quick would that go? That will be the fastest 10 minutes of your life. So this means the empirical time of 10 minutes was changed depending on the situation. But changed in whose presence? In the presence of me, the conscious one. Now you can similarly have an experience of waiting for a bus that you have to take because you're already late to your work. And the bus is coming in 10 minutes. And you're waiting. How long would those 10 minutes be? It will be the longest 10 minutes you've ever had. Therefore, time itself is subject to relativity, or change depending on how it's perceived. But that substratum, that quiet presence in whom the 10 minutes for the dating was there and the 10 minutes for the bus was there, that presence remains unchanged. And therefore, that presence is not subject to, that existence is not subject to time and space. It is the awarefulness, the awareful presence of time. So by this methodology, the Veda brings out what it really means when it says existence awareness by taking out the literal meaning and bringing in the deeper implied meaning. Okay. Now, Veda, we also said, very important, that it is not a book that is Indian. You cannot say Veda is Indian. In fact, I want you to think this for a moment. Suppose you're walking on land right now, and now on this land, there's inside the soil, there's a word written called Australia. And now you're walking, and suddenly you reach a soil, and inside that soil, it says India. Is this how it is? Is this how reality is? Where you got labels written on the soil? Whose air are you breathing now? Are you breathing Portuguese air, Brazilian air, Indian air, Australian air? Whose air are you breathing now? Whose food are you eating? Mexican food, Brazilian food, Portuguese food. Whose food are you eating? Or is it called the food of the Lord? Thereby, knowledge equally does not belong to any culture, any race, of any time. Knowledge is universal. You cannot say that consciousness belongs to a certain continent and it doesn't belong to Africans. Consciousness is the truth of all things. Thereby, first thing we need to drop are these notions and try to isolate a teaching to some particular culture or race. It may have propagated itself at one part of the world much more than another, but that is not going to last too. You may be surprised, but the Veda in 1,000 years, it could be completely dead, unfamiliar in India, and it could grow vastly in the other side of the world, in Africa or or Fiji even. You don't know. Knowledge gets shuffled around wherever, who's ever willing to receive it, that's where the knowledge is going to go. Thereby, this Veda, universal knowledge, consists of both Paravidya and Aparavidya. It is the kind of knowledge that we have all forgotten. Who remembers and who's still an expert at calculus, please? From high school? No one. How come? We were so good, we could recite the periodic table of elements, and none of it is now available. In fact, if one of us starts to speak high school language, we would think you're a genius. But we were all this at one point in time. So this means Aparavidya, called lower knowledge, is a kind of knowledge that is additive. In other words, it always adds some extra chapter. It is never going to be sufficient because it always talks about parts. If you know part 1, you don't know part 2. If you know part 10 million, you don't know part 10 million and 1. So this means the knowledge of Aparavidya always makes you want to know more. So as long as your entire basis of knowledge is isolated to Aparavidya, your whole life would be a pursuit of knowledge. And people will respect you for that. They would think you were a great genius, a great scholar, and you are, but a great scholar of knowledge, which can never satiate you because its knowledge is made of parts, which is ultimately why Aparavidya is called avidya, ignorance, because the more you know, you've ultimately discovered that you don't know even more that you didn't know before. So the more you know, you discover that you don't know. because there is so much to know. Conversely, Paravidya is subtractive. If Aparavidya is additive, what kind of knowledge is Paravidya, the knowledge of Ishwara and Brahman? It is subtractive. This means you don't learn anything new. It's not like you go, oh, I've got a certificate now that I know about intelligence. I know about consciousness. No. In other words, Paravidya causes you to subtract notions which were given to you through Aparavidya, which cause you to see the world as parts, as categories, as divisions, as dualities. It removes that division, those parts, and makes you reconcile reality, seeing that though there are many pieces of wood, of furniture, some chairs, some of them are cups, some of them are utensils, some of them are knives, some of them are beautiful statues made of wood. But does any of those statues or pieces of wood contradict the wood? Does the table contradict the wood? Does the cup made of contradict the wood? No, because wherever there is form with a name attached, such as a cup, that is a form with a name attached, that's a cup in the language of your mother tongue, that's exactly where its substance abides. There is no where throughout the entirety of that cup where you will not find the wood. Now, suppose that cup made of wood starts to meditate on the wood. And it's promised that it's going to see the wood in its Ajna chakra. It's going to see this wood called Brahman in its language. And so it waits and it meditates and it meditates. Or it's going to feel the wood one fine day, which is now called moksha. It is never going to succeed at that. It needs to understand wherever I, the form, am, that's exactly where the substance is. I and substance are one. The only difference is the upadhi. At the level of the upadhi, the form and the name, there is an apparent difference. You cannot say, therefore, that your form is equal to the form of Ishvara, because Ishvara is all forms of the past, present, and future. Whereas your form, your upadhi, is just one form in the present. So the forms are different. Ishvara is upadhi also. Jiva is also upadhi. So the upadhis are different, but their substance, their essential nature is essentially one. So by that, a bhakta, therefore, is able to appreciate and still honor Saraswati and Durga and forms and names, but now they recognize what I'm actually worshiping is nothing but myself. So therefore, jnanam does not contradict bhakti, and bhakti does not contradict jnanam. In fact, bhakti is a natural expression of your jnanam. The more deeper you recognize through nididhyasanam that this reality is one, the more you start to express your actions as an offering, which was mentioned in verse 12 to 14 called the yajna, which is why we said that the yajna is an acknowledgement of Ishvara's presence, that all that is here is one intelligence, which is reshuffling and reorganizing itself constantly to manifest as the very laws that are governing and the forms that are participating in these laws. And therefore, this intelligence is the reality that is obtaining now as Andre, as Pankaj, as Rani, as Dave, as your thought, as everything. And the truth of that intelligence is nothing but awareness. In other words, that intelligence depends on awareness. And how is awareness the final reality known to you right now? It is known to you as effortless amness. It is the most non-interfering reality. Let me ask you a question. For some people, you might say silence is peaceful. Would you agree that silence is peaceful for everyone? Some people go crazy. Just ask COVID-19, you know, when there was silence, people went, just give me some noise, right? So even silence, the subtlest of the subtlest, is something that bothers you. Now, even music can bother you. For some people, music, you know, turn the music down. So silence, the most sublime of all sounds, you could call it, even that can bother you. Now, let me ask you this. Can awareness bother you? Can you be bothered by awareness? Think about this. Suppose you say yes. Is that in reference to awareness, or is that in reference to a thought that occurred in awareness?
Thought.
You were bothered in reference to a thought. You can't be bothered in reference to awareness, because awareness is that light in whom that bothering occurred. It is the knower of the bothering. So even if you say, no, I disagree with you, you are wrong, that too is a thought in the light of awareness that took place. So even sound can bother you, even music can bother you. You can never be bothered by awareness, because to try to be bothered about awareness, that's nothing but a thought occurring in awareness. Okay? Therefore, the Veda brings this reality out, this implied deeper meaning of these words called Paravidya, which is both subtractive and knowledge of the partless. It is partless knowledge. Why is it partless? If Aparavidya is knowledge of the part, Paravidya is knowledge of the partless. Why is it knowledge of the partless? Because like space, it has no parts. In other words, intelligence has no parts. It is just intelligence. We call it pravaha nityatvam. It remains intelligence all throughout, just like your dream. Always the entirety of your dream is filled by the knowledge of your mind. Though every aspect of your dream, every character, every storyline, every law, every order, every conversation is nothing but a filler of your mind's projection. And your mind's projection, its nature is nothing but knowledge, pervaded by you, the conscious being. By the way, suppose you were awake in your dream and you found an ability to be lucid in your dream. And you're like, hey, this is fantastic. I can now change my dream and make it the greatest fantasy ever. Would you ever want to wake up from that dream? If you could keep on changing it, you're like, this is so cool. I hope I don't wake up. I want to squeeze every minute of this dream, manifesting everything that I've ever wanted. You'll be like such a happy camper in that dream. But that dream is only how many thirds of reality? Only 1/3, because you still got the waking and you still got the deep sleep. But you don't care about that. You're just so busy manifesting because you're so happy. So does happiness wake you up as opposed to a nightmare? When you get a nightmare, what happens then? It wakes you up from a dream. So is fear really bad if you look at it from this standpoint? What really wakes you up? What causes you to start the search and solve the ultimate equation? Is it being a happy camper, or is it really coming out that fear, that nightmare? God, this has to change. Something has to change. It snaps you out and you begin your spiritual journey. So if you look at it like this, then every aspect, even fear, something that Arjuna rejected, by the way, he said, oh, Krishna, please remove this fear from my life. You know, I can't look at who was it, the big mouth swallowing all these Kauravas and the blood spewing everywhere. That is the very thing that we need sometimes to snap us out and motivate us to make a huge difference in our life. Therefore, every aspect of Ishvara wants to help you if you choose to see it in that proper light. It was always helping you all along. And therefore, We start to have appreciation, which is why last week we kept on talking about having gratitude to these deities, these forces that are constantly helping you in every facet of your life. You just have to see it that way. And the moment you see it that way, you're no longer a thief. You are now a contributor within this cosmic wheel. And that makes you slowly remove your papam. As Krishna said in Yajna Shishta, your divine leftovers. The food is not just food, it is a divine leftover for me to thank the Lord, the farmers, the packers, the quality inspection workers, the truck drivers, the cashiers, the ones who created the recipe, the people you will never meet. All of them are Ishvara that have been helping you to come closer to Ishvara. And so when you start to look at this entire cosmic wheel as one big hand, invisible hand of the Lord that's always been supporting you in every facet of your life, including those chapters that were not so pleasant once long ago, but now in retrospect, you see that that's whatever it was probably the greatest thing that could have happened. It's one of the wonderful things. Maybe it's not the greatest, but it was a healthy thing in the big picture that caused you to be even more discerning and generous and more more setting more boundaries in your life. So this was all spoken of last week.
Just on your point about Paravidya and Aparavidya, so I just wanted to check, is this the right way to understand it? Aparavidya is learning as the conventional sense, which we understand, learning about what is unreal, and Paravidya then becomes unlearning. So this whole journey is basically unlearning through the process of neti and eliminating. So it is learning and unlearning. Unlearning is the subtractive nature. Is that broadly the way to think about it?
Yes, of course, you need to learn about various ideas in Vedanta. That is learning, but it's not learning as a form of a certificate or getting grades. It's learning to be able to then ultimately see how does this learning relate to me, and then using that learning to negate those things, those upadhis that you have taken on to be you. Because you see, with when we're born, where is our I placed? It's placed in the upadhi. And the upadhi of the body-mind is always limited, isn't it? It always wants, it always craves, it always needs, more love, more validation. These are basic constituents of the upadhi of the body and mind. Now, because your I is placed in that body and mind, who wants more every day? I want more every day. But what is this I referring to? It's referring to the body and mind. So this means as long as I am placed in the body and mind, I think I need more satisfaction in my life and more accomplishments, and things have to happen my way. And you know what happens when things happen your way? What happens? You first get attached. Remember that verse? You first get attached. It means you start to ruminate on things. And then the more you ruminate, desire starts. Now it has to be mine. Now, when I want to make it mine, is it always yours? Does it become yours? 9 out of 10 times it doesn't become yours. So now anger or disappointment or frustration comes, and then causes delusion, moha, negative thinking. Now, in that moment, while I'm thinking negative, how life is not working out for me, I'm not thinking about the Bhagavad Gita, nor the values, nor any of this knowledge. Therefore, it causes loss of memory, and loss of memory causes one to lose their discretion. So now you hear this and you go, okay, so now if this body and mind, which is the troublemaker, if my identity is placed in this body and mind, if that is what's causing this trouble of me constantly having to pursue things, then it stands to reason to discover that my nature is already limitless, whole, full, and complete. And how is it that I now do that? And then, as you say, you do that through neti. So that neti is what's called Paravidya. And how specifically do we do that? We start with, for example, the 5 koshas. We say, well, you take your Annamaya kosha, and you just look at your, your body made of flesh and bones and so on. So if you were as good as your body, then when your body is tired, look at this. If you were as good as your body, then when your body is tired or it's less active, you would be less aware. Because the body and mind is nothing but the karta, the doer, isn't it? What does? The body does. When the mind thinks, that's called a karta. The mind is doing. So this means if I was as good as the body, the moment my body is relaxed, it's not doing anything, you should be in that moment less aware. Are you? No, you're not. You're just aware. You're equally aware. And then when you drink coffee and then your body is walking, are you suddenly more aware because the body is doing more? You're equally aware. You're in your equal awareness. The karta does little bit or does a lot. Now you go into pranamaya kosha. If you were as good as your energy levels, that means when you are just totally tired after work, you should be like unconscious. Are you? No, you're not unconscious. You are aware. But now someone gives you a coffee, you wake up in the morning and you're so buzzed up, you're so energized. Are you now more aware? No, you're equally aware. And then you go on to the manomaya kosha. If you were as good as your thoughts, which are doers, that means when I stop thinking, I should be unconscious. That's not the case. I can stop thinking. Even in samadhi, you can stop thinking. You are aware. So I have nothing to do with the karta, the doer. The doer can be very active. Still, I am aware. In the presence of awareness, there is a karta that's just constantly jumping and hoops left and right. If you were as good as your anandamaya kosha, your bliss, the happiness, then that means when the happiness leaves, you should go out of existence. Is that the case? Not at all. I, the existent, the awareful one, remain whether happiness comes or happiness goes. And in what quantity? Priya, moda, pramoda, whether what quantity of happiness is there, it doesn't affect my awareness. So that's called neti neti. So by this logic, you see that, so I don't need the body to be in a certain state for me to exist. I don't need the waker called the Vishwa. I don't need the Vishwa, the waker, for me to exist because the waker can disappear. I continue to be. If you were as good as the waker and you thought you were the waker, would you want to dream? Because that would mean the end of you. But we gladly dream. That means there's something about you that understands I'm not this Vishwa, the waker. I'm not the Taijasa, the dreamer. Otherwise, if you were as good as the dreamer, when the dream ends and the waking, right, or the sleep comes, the prajna comes, you will go out of existence. So there's something about you, the awareful presence, that recognizes that there can be this upadhi change in reference to the doer, in reference to these 5 koshas, in reference to the 3 states. I remain exactly I, the conscious, awareful presence. And that presence is the truth of Ishvara and every name and form. And thereby, this is called neti neti. So you're right. So Paravidya is this very methodology that subtracts these ideas that made me think I'm as good as these 5 koshas.
Thank you.
Is this statement correct if I say that awareness can be bothering if you are not accepting of the reality?
No, in the presence of awareness, there is a bothered mind. So it's not that awareness is bothering you, a thought is bothering you. You hear that distinction? Okay. It's not, awareness can't bother you. That's what I wanted to point out. Even silence can bother you. Sound, music can bother you. Awareness can't bother you because awareness is always that which is prior to the bothering. It is prior to the emotion, prior to the thought.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. How is that out of 10 for your answer?
Well, I was thinking like, I understand that thought causes the bothering in awareness. I understand that. But somehow I was thinking like, if I'm aware and I'm not accepting the reality of me, like the reality around me, then it would bother my awareness, which is actually a thought, but still the point I'm trying to convey here is I'm not accepting the reality.
Got
That's why I'm aware. I'm bothered. My awareness is bothered.
No, your awareness is not bothered. Your mind is bothered. In the presence of awareness, there is bothering. You see the language that I'm using? I'm not saying my awareness is bothered. In the presence of I, the awareful being, there is bothering. And the bothering belongs to the mind.
Yeah, okay.
Or I'm the knower of the known. The known is the bothering. The knower is?
Awareness.
The knower is awareness. Good.
So this isn't a question, more so than an action that I started taking after the last 2 weeks of discussion around yajna. There was a comment you made last week about when food arrives, we just dig in like a dog.
Airplane
rather than like a human. Yeah. So I took a decision after last Sunday that every meal and every beverage that I consume, before I do it, I'm going to offer it to Krishna first and then have it. And like, it seems like on paper, like, okay, cool. Like it's not going to make a big difference. But you won't believe how much it has changed my experience of just daily life, because it breaks you out of this kind of, like you said, autopilot, it and eat, and not even, and then that experience is done, and then next experience. But just doing this 3 times a day has like calmed me in a really weird way. And it's truly changing my experience of life. So I just wanted to share that because it's a very beautiful, practical application of what we've been talking about.
Yeah. And what's even more amazing is that, you have so many more years to live. So you can imagine how much more your mind will be, wonderfully sculpted by this practice, and how many more wonderful things can this make your mind make you more sensitive to the realities that are always around you, that are so beautiful to witness and to breathe. So breathing air is not just breathing air anymore. It's actually something you get free entertainment, right? No need for a kind of, you just go outside. Wow, I'm breathing beauty, right? So it's just a perspective change that's required. That's all. So entertainment really is free for all of us. Yeah, well done. Good.
Yeah, Andre, I have a very basic question. It's always bothered me. I've not understood why should there be a separate Anandamaya Kosh? It should logically form part of Manomaya Kosh, because happiness and sadness is part of the Manomaya Kosh, and therefore there should be a separate Dukkhamaya Kosh if it is an Anandamaya Kosh. I've not got it. And secondly, if there is a connection between Anandamaya Kosh and Anand in Satchitanand.
No.
Not Anand. Is there a connection between Anandamaya Kosh and Satchitanand?
No, not at all. Not at all. Anandamaya Kosha is basically just an experience of happiness. And the reason why it's not Satchit Ananda is because Ananda means fullness. It is constant. Whereas Anandamaya Kosha only gives you temporary glimpses. So it's like a little taster, whereas Ananda is limitless fullness. That's why.
Always my question is, why do we talk of Anandamaya Kosh? Why do we talk of that happiness? Because there is that happiness and there is that sadness also.
Yeah.
So why should koshas only talk of happiness? That, here your happiness resides, and what happiness you are tasting is coming from that, and you don't realize that. And you are attributing that happiness to the vastu, to the equipment, to the object. So similarly, why should not there be a sadness part? Why should we separate happiness and attribute it somewhere?
Difference between Anandamaya Kosha and Manomaya Kosha is Anandamaya Kosha specifically refers to the happiness, Priya, Moda, Pramoda, the 3 kinds of happiness. Whereas Manomaya Kosha can refer to Dukkham or Sukham, or any kind of emotion that is, you can classify in the dictionary, that is Manomaya Kosha. Whereas Anandamaya Kosha is specifically happiness. Okay, so you can now put a nice little, for simplicity, category. Anandamaya Kosha equals happiness only. Manomaya Kosha equals anything other than happiness, it's emotion. However, I want to make this clear. Don't create these distinctions, okay? It just wants to point out, for the sake of this neti, this discernment, that all these emotions, they come and go, right? They belong. And what is that comes and goes? It's called emotions, the manomaya kosha. Same with happiness. It comes and goes. And what is that kosha of happiness that comes and goes? We call it anandamaya kosha. Both of them enjoy a certain perishability about them. They both come and go. Why do we get confused with anandamaya kosha, this happiness, with the satchit ananda? You see, there's a very good connection between them. When you are happy, that is Ishvara's way of giving you a glimpse into your full nature. So in that moment, we use the example of a lake. See, when the lake is quiet for a moment, it reflects the fullness of the sun. Have you ever actually looked at a lake and it's ripply, it's wavy, and it's reflecting the sun? Do you ever notice how annoying that becomes after some time? I mean, it's still reflecting the sun, but it's somehow that very same sun becomes kind of agitating. You can't read your book. It's kind of flickering. You just want to move into the shade. So this is like that. As long as my mind is ripply, what do I want? I want to still that mind. Now, that stillness of the mind can be equated to anandamaya kosha. That means now it's reflecting the fullness temporarily of who I am, until, of course, a next vasana comes in and then spoils that stillness. It's like throwing another pebble. I want, which is, again, now you go, oh my God, now I have to go and pursue that too in order to bring the anandamaya kosha into my experience and still the lake. So anandamaya kosha gives you a glimpse into your fullness. The era is when a lot of people in the spiritual world say, I am happiness. I'm here to be happy. I'm here to experience love. It's the same thing. Happy and love is just two things from a different standpoint. I'm here to learn love. I'm here to learn happiness, because when you're in love, you're happy. Okay, so now it wants to show you that this happiness is very subtle. It's a very good taster of Satchit Ananda, but it is not your actual fullness. It is just a taster of your fullness. So you can appreciate it, but don't take it to be I. So even your happiness that you experience is not the real you.
So, Andre, just correct me if I've got it right.
Okay.
So, what we are discussing here is that we have to dismiss the fifth kosh, Anandamaya kosh, also because it is transient and that happiness is transient. What we mean Ananda as part of Satchidananda is fullness, which means satisfaction, which means no more want remaining, and contentment. Is it okay?
You're right, and I'll give you a metaphor for that. Suppose you understand that the sun is always shining, okay? So this is the wise person. They know the sun is always shining. But what happens? The wise person also has clouds, like anyone else. Now, when the clouds come, is there happiness for the wise person? Is there experiential happiness? No, because the clouds are there, right? There's a ripply lake. But there is a form of happiness in terms of knowledge, because I know, where's my knowledge, where's my happiness coming from? The sun never went. It is still, I'm still aware. That awareness is the final truth. So that means I have not gone anywhere. Whereas a ajnani, for them, when the clouds come, what happens? What do they want to do?
Anandamaya kosh goes away.
Yeah, Anandamaya kosha goes away. They scramble to blow those clouds away. Whatever is necessary, take the fan, go hiking, get a journey, whatever to blow the clouds away until I see the sun. Anandamaya kosha, okay? Whereas the wise person can be okay if their mind is clouded and it's agitated, because they understand cognitively that I have not gone anywhere. From that, the wise person's happiness is always there. You see, so it's a difference between saying the wise person is happy because they have experiential happiness, and the wise person is happy because they understand whether there's experiential happiness or not, I am still full, I'm still limitless and complete. And that is the ultimate joy that you can get, because you have not gone anywhere. That is what's so important to be stressed in, even in Advaita, because we get this idea that the wise person has constant clarity of the clouds are never there. That's not possible, because you still carry this Manomaya Vijnanamaya Kosha, whose job is to bring clouds. So that means that if I didn't have clouds, you could not operate in this world. So you got to have clouds. Otherwise, you couldn't have compassion. If somebody dies, you're like, oh, so what? Right? Nobody could relate to you. So, so if someone dies, you will have a certain kind of sadness, right? Some empathetic sadness, which is good. It's a healthy attitude. But behind that sadness, I am who I am. I never will be anything other than what I am, which is what verse 17 is going to talk about. Now, verse 16 says that without the Veda, without the rules of the game, without the yajna, as Amrita has pointed out, without all of these wonderful things that are provided for us, one risks becoming it uses the word aghayu, one who is living with a certain attitude that is injurious to oneself. So let's see what verse 16 says. Evam pravartitam chakram nanu vartayati hayaha aghayurindriya ramaha mogham partha sajivati.
A person who does not follow here in this life, this cosmic wheel that is already set in motion in this manner, and lives in sin, given only to the pleasures of the senses, lives wastefully, Partha Arjuna.
So it says the word cosmic wheel. So this is what we're talking about, the cosmic wheel, which you are a participant of. So this verse points out the shift that a person undergoes from victim mode to taking accountability for your life. And what is victim mode?
Just blaming everything.
Taking everything personally, thinking everything's happening to me.
Yeah.
Just that pratibhasika satyam is totally gone full tilt.
Yeah, it's true. Everything's happening to me. It's all about me, me, me. That's victim mode. Okay. So it's about taking the shift. It's a courageous shift that one takes in one's life from being this, why me? Why did God do this to me? Why did they die? It's not fair. I've got these issues. I should not have these issues. So you're always kind of finding this reason to make it personal, but also not to help yourself. So taking the shift from victim mode to taking full accountability for everything that happens to you. Now, I know you could say that you don't have total control in your life. That has a place. But in this verse, we want to say what it means to take accountability is you say, you know what? This has happened. Now what? What's the solution? What's next? What have I learned from this? What is it showing me about myself? In what ways can this actually be a blessing? What's the hidden blessing inside this lesson? What would change next time? What have I learned about myself? What have I learned about human nature? This is so good that this happened. Wow. What now? In what ways will I transform my life? In what ways will this build strength in me? How can this build independence in me? How will I contribute differently now? What have I learned about human behavior, human psychology, about myself? So many questions can you ask from anything that happens to you. This is taking full accountability for your life. So this chakra wheel calls for a certain value that I'm contributing into the universe, starting with prayer, starting with gratitude, of course. And we can see this cosmic wheel of mutual benefit anywhere you see. I used this example last week by pointing out honeys, not honeys, but bees, and how they, quote, accidentally pollinate other flowers. It's not accident. There's a certain order behind it. So they go and take nectar from the flowers, but in so doing, they are pollinating other flowers and thereby causing them to reproduce. I also use the example of tiny bacteria, good bacteria in the guts, which are feeding, which are finding home and breaking down your food simultaneously, and also breaking down bad bacteria in the small and large intestine. Okay, so this is both mutual benefit. There is also an example of roots, where a certain fungi attaches to roots of a tree. And this fungi, it stretches out. And by stretching out, it collects more minerals and water, feeding the tree. But that fungi also feeds off the sugars that the tree produces that the fungi cannot. Or you take a professional, someone that works as a consultant. When a consultant offers their services, or you as a worker or employee offer your services to your your clients, then you help them, but simultaneously they give you feedback about your performance. And so you develop a certain refinement about your practice, and you learn because you're able to give to them. Or a grandmother, she's old and now she's got grandkids. What happens? Now she's able to give her knowledge and experience and stories to the grandkids, but her grandkids simultaneously give her a renewed, rejuvenated sense of purpose and meaning in life. Mutual benefits, any way you see. Now the verse says, it gives a warning. It says that if you choose to live in this chakra wheel, live freely. That's okay if you want to do that. Live freely, go by the beach, drink your apple juice, your orange juice, watch the young skin passing by, put your hands behind, go, life is good, the sun is shining, I've got everything I need. That's okay. The verse then says, if you want to do that, engage in sensory pleasures, indriya rama, and you want to continue in dishonest or selfish living, which is aghayu, life is moha, life is wasteful. That means you're given a precious gift, something that jivas would kill to get. Little spiders looking up to you going, man, they got a human body. I have to just spin and weave web all day and eat mosquitoes. I want that body. And then a dog is looking at you, man, I wish I could, be in their place and they're like me, right? Or whatever you are. So it's a big thing to get this human body. And now you're using this human body for indriya rama, for sensory pleasures, for, just not really participating. Well, life is wasteful according to Krishna. And we don't want this. We don't want a wasteful life. And there's a nice parable that demonstrates how a wasteful life actually costs you a little bit later. It's not immediately evident, but it costs you a little bit later. And I think this comes from Swami Dayananda. He said the story of a milk tank where the king had a belief that his subjects in the kingdom were all wonderful people. The king thought this, but the minister thought otherwise. The minister thought it was a little bit suspicious. These people, they're nice initially, but behind the scenes, there's a facade. And the minister wanted to prove his point. So he built a big wooden bucket where everyone could contribute a little bit of milk from the village because they were farmers. And he put a ladder. So it says, climb on this ladder and put a little bit of milk, and we will use this milk for reserves for when we all need it, right? Because we are in times when the cows are just on a strike. The cows didn't want to build milk. They want to strike, like moo moo, we need more grass, right? So they needed some milk. And after a week, the minister came and he was like, good, now let's take our milk. And he looked inside and he only saw water. He says, look at this. There's only water. What does this mean? And he said to the king, this shows us two things, king. First of all, every person thought, hey, you know what? Everyone's putting in the milk. I don't have to put the milk. Who's going to notice? That's exactly what everyone else was thinking. So they all thought like this, and they all put water inside. So nobody had any reserves now. And the second is that each person reasoned, as I said, no one's going to, I don't have to do this, they've got reserves. But the case is not like that, because you are an active participant, and your work, your contribution does affect the whole chakra wheel. And thereby, when they needed that milk, nobody had any milk to drink, and they all realized, that they didn't do what was expected of them to do. So now, if you apply this to, your own experience and life in general, yes, you can kind of, not contribute, but no, it doesn't get unnoticed. It goes fully noticed. And who notices it most? You notice it. And this is the second lesson that the minister said to the king. Now that the subjects didn't deposit this milk, what did they think to themselves? I don't have to. I'm not part of this order. I'm not willing to. I'm incapable of, supporting myself. We're kind of scarcity mindset. So all of these things, these subjects were telling themselves. So now you carry this narrative into self-knowledge. And what's your narrative? I can't. I'm separate. Scarcity mindset. I'm unwilling to. I'm incapable. And then the minister told to the king, it's easy to get away with it once, but you cannot really get away with it in the big picture. If there is a Passover. If there wasn't Passover, it would not be a problem. But there is always a Passover. It carries on, and you cannot get away from the consequences. So something so insignificant like doing the right thing, when it comes time to doing something so important, and when you need those skills that you could have developed in doing your part in this chakra wheel, they're absent. Therefore, this is so wonderful to know that Ishvara doesn't spare anyone. There's no cheating in this system. Ishvara's F-16 fighter pilots always seeking out, okay, who's cheating, who's taking shortcuts, who's not contributing the milk, who's skipping their part, who's thinks they can just go Indriya Rama, sense pleasure pursuits. Okay, let's a little sting. The person gets a little sting, and life pops your bubble. That's how life is built. Nothing can sustain itself in Ishvara's order. It eventually gets popped. That's why people can believe they're enlightened for many years, and they can kind of carry this certain, attitude about themselves. I know I'm above Ishvara, I'm above this. That bubble never, ever lasts. Thank God. And it gets broken when a person's however many years, I don't know, but I've heard even in the Osho community, where people were following, with total devotion, and after 20 plus years, still like grown-up children, nothing has changed. Still, still using the same words and looking down on people and so on. Not all of them, but right, for the most part. So this means work cannot get skipped. And thank God for this. Otherwise, it would be a broken system. It wouldn't be fair for you to work so hard and get a little bit, and someone just to sort of lay down on the beach, not do anything, and they're just, it's all flowing for them. It doesn't work like that. It may seem initially, but that's because they got some karma to exhaust. In fact, those who are enjoying themselves, that enjoyment too will get exhausted. Never ever noticed that? You can't enjoy yourself forever. But the good part is, even your suffering gets exhausted. So your enjoyment and suffering both cannot last, but you have to go through them in order to exhaust them. Then Krishna says, the one who is aligned to this cosmic wheel eventually gains moksha. And from there on, nothing else is to be done. And when I say gains moksha, not that you gain anything, you just remove ignorance that made you think that you're not already enlightened. That's what moksha really means. So verse 17. Yastvat maratireva syad atma triptascha manavaha atmanyeva cha santushtaha tasya karyam na vidyate.
Whereas for the person who is delighted in the self, who is satisfied with the self, contented in the self alone, For them, there is nothing to be done.
Okay. So whereas for the person who has aligned themselves to this cosmic order, who knows that there is no cheating, that hard work is required, what happens? They are now Atmarati. So Krishna describes that jnani in 3 words. Atmarati, delights in the self as the self. Not just delights in the self. It's not like a jnani delights in the self. That's called an experience. But the jnani delights in the self as that very self. So what does it mean to delight in the self? What makes you not delighted? Let's ask that. Because I want things to work out my way. Things have to happen according to my expectations. Because my happiness depends on things working out in a certain manner. Because I want objects to look like how I want them to be. Because this has shown up and I don't want it in my life. Because I'm not big enough. Because I haven't become someone. Can you be delighted with all of that? No way. There's always some other desire that's going to bother you. So the one who delights in the self as the self. In other words, there is nothing more than knowing you are Brahman. That is it. That awareness that we're speaking of from the beginning of the session, that is the final reality. There's nothing more than that. There's no higher awareness, lower awareness. There's no levels of awareness or consciousness. If you are clear about that awareness, that's true, ever present, ever available, that's called moksha. Your understanding that is the truth of all that is. It was never supposed to be complex, by the way. Only a mind that doesn't get it will make it complex. It's supposed to be the simplest of the simplest. Even 1 + 1 is quite complex, isn't it? For a kid, at least. But does the kid have to know that I am aware? You don't have to go to work, to education to learn that. It's evident to everyone. The only issue is you think that awareness is right as good as the body-mind. So you think your body-mind is that awareness. That's what we have to use, that Atma Anatma Viveka. That's the methodology. But if you know you are that consciousness, that amness, that is the ultimate delight, because it is the security of all securities. What more do you want than to exist? Can you be happy unless you exist? Suppose you didn't exist. Could you be happy? Oh, I want happiness. I want to become something. Why do you want to become something? Because you exist. What more do you want than to exist? So one delights in oneself as oneself. One delights in one's existence. I exist. That existence will never cease. It always is. It always will be. It always has been. It will never get tainted. It will never get contaminated. It will never get colored in. It will never get spoiled. It is the truth of all things. In Mundaka Upanishad, we nicely say that Brahman, we don't even use the word Ishvara. We say Brahman is Sarvavid and Sarvajna. Sarvavid means knows everything, not only in detail, but also knows its one's own truth, knows one's own truth. But right now, you only know your own truth. A wise person cannot know everything because you have a upadi called the mind. A mind upadi cannot know the details of how to fly rockets and what's, all the periodic table of elements and what comes before time and space. You don't know that. But what can you know? You can know the truth of everything. So there's a certain limitation, even as a wise person, and that limitation is only temporary. And what is that limitation? You cannot know everything. See, sometimes in the spiritual world, we try to know everything, don't we? I'm supposed to know everything. I'm a wise person. I must know everything. No, a wise person doesn't know everything in terms of details. So they're not a Sarvavid, they're only a Sarvajna. Sarvajna, I know everything in terms of content. What do I mean by this? Well, suppose a sandcastle, as I used last week, is made, right? A very complex castle, chimney, roof, and all these details. Can you know how it all works, and gears, and all these mechanics? Will you ever know all these names and forms of that castle? Can you know that? No. But what can you know? You can know it is all sand. You can know the substance. Therefore, one delights in oneself as the self. So this means I know the truth of everything. And not only that, but the Vedas themselves, to whom are the Vedas talking to? Are they talking to a jnani or the ajnani?
Ajnani.
Ajnani, okay. So this means that until I understand the knowledge, to whom is the Veda talking to? It's talking to me, the one who takes myself to be, who's actually limitless, but takes myself to be a limited individual. So now the Veda wants to show me that actually you are limitless. Now, when I discover my limitless nature, do I still need the Veda?
No.
No. Now you are the cause of the Veda. In fact, you were always the cause of the Veda. Veda just means knowledge. You were always the substratum of the Veda. Veda was just there to show you that. So therefore, Veda, even the Veda, loses you. There's a certain change of perspective towards the Veda. Before, it was a wonderful text, and it's like, was so amazing, this consciousness and awareness and this big God, and I have to attain that. And when you understand that, that fascination, there's an appreciation. But is it now mysterious? Is it going over your head? No more. You've understood what the Veda was showing you. It's done its job. Now you can read the book like a magazine. Oh, fun, interesting. Ishvara Brahman. Okay, a million different names for that. But it doesn't sort of kind of, make you go, wow, what is this reality? Because you understood. Okay. Now, Atma Tripta. One is satisfied with the self as the self. Again, why are you satisfied with the self as the self?
Because when you know what you are, there is nothing more to be gained, so you are satisfied.
There's nothing more to be gained. Is there more to accomplish?
No.
No. Why not? Why is there not more to accomplish when you know the self?
Because you know that you are the whole. And if anything that you want to do, you may want to give it back to the society. That is not for self gain. That is for the society.
My view was that when you get this self knowledge, is it permanent or is it temporary?
So
Maybe if it is momentary, then again you will need to get so many moments again and again and again so that it becomes permanent. So we have to differentiate between a sense of self-knowledge, which is instantaneous or momentary, and something which is completely forever.
Yes. And that's a good point. Sometimes people will say, what if you understand the nature of the self and you get dementia or Alzheimer's? Does that cancel out your self-knowledge?
I can answer in one way.
Okay.
Technically, it does. But, in a bhakti marg, they say you can only get self-knowledge if, the Lord wants you to get it. So if He wanted you to get it, then you have got it forever. Even if you have dementia, if you return back.
Okay, I'm going to ask this question again. Suppose you get self-knowledge and you understand officially moksha, you understand who you are, and dementia or Alzheimer's comes. You forgot about Vedanta, you forgot about you ever attended any classes, you forgot about Satya Mithya teaching. Are you still liberated?
Yes, I don't think you will get a rebirth again. Because, out of millions and millions of life, you have reached a stage. I do not think there is any turning back from there.
Already liberated, regardless of what your mind status is.
Good, good.
Okay.
We are already there. We just have this wrong notion that I'm not there. So what difference does it make if I have dementia or I don't have dementia?
Yeah. And to whom does dementia belong?
It's the mind, right?
Yeah, it's the mind.
Mind is not the Atma.
Okay, Lorena?
I would say Atma is the truth of the past, the present, and the future. So any kind of time-bound notion, if you understand that fact, before you get dementia, then it doesn't matter what happens afterwards because it's not time bound.
Excellent, excellent. In other words, you're that which preceded that and still remains after. So in other words, your identity has shifted from a time-bound momentary event that happened to the mind, to the brain, onto that which is free of attributes, free of illness, free of, it's nirgunam. Good. And not only that, but whatever happens at the level of the brain doesn't happen at the level of me. So this is very good logic. Okay. So what does this mean? You better figure this out before the brain is no longer capable. And I really mean this because I have seen a case where someone was learning Vedanta with dementia and it didn't work for them. It was more of an escape, in my opinion. It was because when someone has dementia or their brain is in a degenerative state, it's not able to hold anything. It's in too much pain, too much confusion. It cannot make the dots, connect the dots. It's not possible. So in that case, we just recommended pray, very simple, return back to your breath, simple practices. Next life, you'll get another chance.
This is why I hold so much compassion for people with dementia that I look after.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Just this knowledge, it reminds me, life has got this temporary notion where you've got an opportunity, and if you get dementia, that takes away all the opportunities to understand this. So yeah, the compassion comes in from that.
Right. So this means that there is this idea of waiting to be, after Vanaprastha, after your 50s or 60s, even that is a little bit, questionable because if it's not like you choose. See, it's not something that you choose. Okay, now I've done my work. Now let's do this knowledge. It's something that you evolve into, you grow into it. So the general best scenario is as early as possible. Because look at this, if you figure it out as early as possible, like we will see in verse 20, Janaka was able to continue ruling his kingdom after he gained moksha. But now, without any pressure, no longer I have to become this special king and, I have to kind of be seen. So in other words, everything continues, but with a lot less pressure because there's no more this pressure. I have to become something. No one's giving me any validation. I'm not getting any love. You are loving what you do because it is a sense of yajna. It's an offering to the Lord. So moksha makes every action enjoyable. It really does. It takes away this, I have to do more. I'm not doing enough. I should be saving the world. No, you don't. You just do whatever you do. And you really just enjoy whatever it is then.
Andre, in our class or anybody whom I have met, everybody is regretful of the fact that they have wasted so many years to come to this. And they're thankful for the fact that at least in this life, they have come to this.
Yes, at least in this life. So that means you haven't wasted your life. So we can thank our old jivas, whoever they were. Maybe my name was Gautam in the last life and doing who knows what.
Buddha.
And then Atma, so Atma, Tripta, satisfied with the self as the self because nothing more can give you contentment. You're already full, whole, and complete. And your body will naturally do what is to be done. So this is not an issue. Because sometimes people ask, now that I've attained moksha, I know Brahman, I'm still bored. I see this question, really. It doesn't make sense. Who's bored, right? I'm bored. What do I do now? Okay, is this it? So in other words, it tells me that all this time they were looking for Brahman to suddenly be in this fantastic state where they're so alert now and everything's so beautiful. The question's coming from a wrong place. When you understand your nature, your body, as always has been, continues to do what it always has been doing according to its prarabdha karma. Let it continue. Its talents, its skills will be done no matter what you say. It will continue. And then finally, Atmani eva santushtaha, again, contented in the self as the self. In other words, your contentment doesn't depend on becoming someone. You already are everything. Therefore, for him, there is nothing to be done. For her, for the jnani or the jnanini, there is nothing to be done. And this is another nice statement. What does this mean? Does this mean now they're lazy? They don't do anything? What do you think this means? For him or her, the jnani, there is nothing to be done.
There's nothing to be achieved for himself, but he should pay back the debt to society.
Good, good. You see the statement? For him, there is nothing to be done. Okay, who has been doing all this time? The body mind. The jiva, the body mind has been doing all this time. So this means when you attain the highest, you recognize the truth of all things. From that moment on, your spiritual studies are over. You have finished in terms of finding out who you are. Now all that continues is the work that you have always been doing, whatever your work is, and that will go until the last breath. And therefore, the jnana is no longer caught by the problems that haunt the person before becoming. Will I get that? Will I actually get it? And what if I don't get it? That's a problem. While becoming, oh God, it's not as easy as I thought. That's a problem. After I get it, oh, now that I've got it, it's not as pleasant as I thought. It's not of a big deal. Now I need to get something else. That's another problem. So all throughout, before becoming, while becoming, and after becoming, there's a certain pain, a certain anxiety that haunts the person. Now that I've understood, I've attained everything, whatever you do is okay. No more pressure or complications. Whatever you do is a certain blessing. And therefore, your true nature never gets tainted, never gets affected by the punyam or the papam, because you're already everywhere. That which is all pervasive cannot move, and therefore you cannot act. And you are that which is all pervasive. Therefore, your identity has changed onto the all pervading one, and you have now been born and accomplished the highest purpose of birth. And how will the rest of the people look at you? With a halo on your head?
Just normal.
Normal. So normal. In fact, even more normal than before. Because the wise person has no need to stand out. Kind of ironic, isn't it? The one who's very loud, well, they're loud, but the one who has the truth is that which is least interfering, most quiet. What is the most non-interfering thing in your experience? Does awareness bother you?
Awareness.
Does awareness interfere? No. As I said, even silence can interfere. I don't like silence. It's interfering. But the truth is that which is the most silent, most non-interfering. And therefore that reflects at the level of the personality. And so the person simply remains humble. If you want to learn this, that's fine. If not, that's also fine. But they certainly don't go out like a evangelist, with a big bullhorn and saying, come over, join us. And after you drop your body, what happens? You're sarvajna and sarvavid. Not only do you know your nature while living, also you know your nature, but also you know everything. You're now Ishvara and Brahman. Now, to whom are we praying to? Suppose one of you, attains moksha and you die. And I'm still alive. And I pray, oh Lord, make my life easy. To whom am I praying to? I'm praying to you because you are now Ishvara. You are Sarvavid Sarvajna. Purnamada Purnam Purnat Purnamudachyate Asya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.